The champagne glass slipped from my fingers, shattering against the hardwood floor of the community center as I watched my daughter-in-law Sarah's hand pull back from my drink. The amber liquid spread across the worn planks like spilled secrets, and in that frozen moment, I knew my retirement party had just become something else entirely. "Oh, Theodora." Sarah's voice rang out, sweet as poisoned honey. "How clumsy of you. Let me get you another." But I'd already seen it, the small white tablet dissolving into nothing in my punch glass, the way her fingers had lingered over the rim, the practiced smoothness of her movement. 72 years of watching people had taught me to notice what others missed, and Sarah had just made the biggest mistake of her life. The retirement party continued around us, my former colleagues from the Millfield Public Library chatting about my 38 years of service, completely unaware that predator and prey had just switched positions. The scent of grocery store cake and instant coffee filled the air, mixing with the cleaning solution they used on these floors every Tuesday. I could hear Mrs. Henderson from circulation laughing too loudly at something, her voice cutting through the gentle hum of conversation like it always did. Before I go further, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and if you're hooked already, a like and subscribe will keep these stories coming. Actually, Sarah, I think I'll pass on the punch for now. I kept my voice steady, the same tone I'd used with difficult patrons for decades. My stomach's been a bit sensitive today. Her smile flickered, just for a heartbeat, but I caught it. "Oh, are you sure? It's your favorite. I made sure they got the recipe right." My favorite. How would she know my favorite anything? In the 5 years since she'd married my son David, Sarah had never once asked about my preferences. She'd never asked about anything except my will, my house, and when I planned to downsize. Now suddenly she was concerned about my punch preferences? I moved closer to the refreshment table, letting my hand trail along its edge. Years of reshelving books had given me steady fingers and an eye for detail. The punch bowl sat in the center, surrounded by paper cups and napkins printed with "Happy Retirement Theodora" in cheerful blue letters. Innocent enough, except for the small prescription bottle I glimpsed Sarah sliding into her purse when she thought no one was looking. The community center felt smaller than usual tonight, cramped with familiar faces offering congratulations and memories. Principal Martinez from the elementary school where I'd conducted story time for 20 years. The Carroway twins, now grown women with children of their own, who still remembered when I'd helped them with their first research projects. Even cranky old Mr. Peterson had shown up, probably for the free food, but still. But my eyes kept drifting back to Sarah, watching her work the room with practiced ease. She had that gift, the ability to make everyone feel like they were the most important person in the conversation. I'd watched her do it at every family gathering, every holiday dinner. She'd compliment someone's dress while calculating the cost of their jewelry, ask about their health while fishing for information about their finances. "Theodora, you look wonderful tonight." Mrs. Chun from the reference desk appeared beside me, her voice warm with genuine affection. "Retirement suits you already." "Thank you, dear." I managed a smile, but my attention was split. Sarah had moved to the other side of the room, her phone pressed to her ear. From where I stood, I could just make out fragments of her conversation. "Should work within the hour. Make sure the paperwork is ready. Won't know what hit her." The last phrase made my blood freeze. Won't know what hit her. The same words Sarah had used 3 months ago when she thought I was napping in my chair during Sunday dinner, talking to someone on her phone about the old bat, and how much easier things would be once I was out of the picture permanently. I'd been too shocked then to react, too hurt to believe my own ears. But now, watching her slip tablets into drinks and make hushed phone calls at my own retirement party, the pieces were falling into place with terrifying clarity. The room suddenly felt too warm, too bright. The cheerful conversations around me blurred into white noise as reality crashed over me like ice water. This wasn't paranoia or the fears of an aging mind. This was attempted murder, planned and executed at what should have been a celebration of my life's work. "Theodora." Mrs. Chun touched my arm gently. "Are you all right? You've gone quite pale." "I'm fine, just a little overwhelmed by all the attention." The lie came easily, a skill I'd perfected during years of dealing with difficult board members and budget cuts. "Would you mind keeping me company for a moment?" I'm feeling a bit unsteady. As Mrs. Chun fussed over me, guiding me to a folding chair near the wall, I used the moment to think. Sarah had drugged my drink, expecting me to consume whatever she'd slipped in there. But what was her endgame? A sudden heart attack at my own retirement party? An unfortunate accident on the drive home? The prescription bottle in her purse held answers, but getting to it would require strategy. Fortunately, strategy was something I'd learned from the best teacher possible, 38 years of handling every type of human behavior the library system could throw at me. David approached us then, my son's face bright with the kind of pride that made my chest ache. Mom, everyone's asking when you're going to give your speech. Are you ready? Speech. Right. In all the excitement, I'd forgotten about the little thank you remarks I'd prepared. But looking at my son's earnest face, then glancing over at his wife who was now chatting animatedly with the party coordinator, a new plan began forming in my mind. Actually, David, I think I'd like to say a few words now, while everyone's here. I stood up slowly, letting Mrs. Chun steady me with her arm. But first, could you ask Sarah to come over? I want to thank her specifically for all her help organizing this party. David beamed. Of course. Sarah worked so hard on this. She wanted everything to be perfect for you. Perfect. The word tasted bitter as he walked away to fetch his wife. Sarah had indeed wanted everything perfect, perfectly planned, perfectly executed, and perfectly final. I watched her face as David spoke to her, saw the moment of confusion when he mentioned my wanting to thank her publicly, then the practiced smile that slid back into place. She was good at this, I'd give her that. Years of practice, no doubt. As Sarah made her way over to me, weaving through clusters of well-wishers, I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades, the thrill of the hunt. All those years helping patrons track down obscure information, solving research puzzles, unraveling mysteries hidden in dusty books and forgotten archives. I'd forgotten how much I loved a good mystery. The difference was, this time I wasn't just the librarian. This time, I was both the detective and the intended victim. Sarah reached me with that brilliant smile still painted across her features. David said you wanted to thank me? Oh, Theodora, that's so sweet, but really it was nothing. Just wanted to make sure your special day was memorable. Memorable. Yes, I had a feeling this day would be unforgettable indeed. I was about to respond when the lights in the community center flickered once, twice, then went out completely, plunging the party into darkness and causing several people to gasp in surprise. In the confusion of voices calling out and people fumbling for their phones' flashlight features, I heard something that made every nerve in my body go rigid, the distinct sound of Sarah's purse hitting the floor, followed by the unmistakable rattle of pills scattering across the hardwood. And in the darkness, someone screamed. Chapter 2, Secrets in the Dark. The scream cut through the darkness like a blade, high and terrified, but it wasn't Sarah's voice. In the chaos of people bumping into chairs and calling out for light, I dropped to my hands and knees, my fingers searching the floor where I'd heard those pills scatter. Everyone stay calm. Principal Martinez's voice boomed over the confusion. The backup generator should kick in any moment. My fingertips brushed against something small and round, a pill. Then another. I swept them into my palm, feeling along the smooth hardwood for more. Beside me, I could hear Sarah's panicked breathing, could sense her own desperate scrambling in the darkness. My purse, she whispered, so quietly I almost missed it. Where's my purse? The emergency lighting flickered on, casting everything in an eerie red glow. I was already sitting back in my chair, my closed fist tucked against my side, when Sarah's eyes found mine in the crimson half-light. Her face was a mask of controlled terror. Are you all right, Mrs. Carroway? A young man I didn't recognize knelt beside the woman who'd screamed, Janet Fuller from the children's section. She was clutching her ankle, tears streaming down her cheeks. I think it's broken, Janet gasped. I was trying to find the light switch and something made me trip. There were things all over the floor. Sarah's purse lay open beside Janet, its contents spilled across a 3-foot radius. Lipstick, wallet, keys, and scattered among them like deadly confetti, at least a dozen small white pills. In the red emergency lighting, they looked like tiny skulls grinning up at us. Oh my goodness, Sarah said, her voice perfectly pitched with concern as she moved to gather her belongings. "I'm so sorry, Janet. My purse must have fallen when the lights went out." But I was faster. My librarian reflexes, honed by decades of catching falling books and preventing accidents, served me well. I scooped up 3 more pills before Sarah could stop me, adding them to my growing collection. "Let me help," I said sweetly, making a show of gathering scattered items. "Pills everywhere. How careless. What are these for, dear?" Sarah's hand shot out to grab the remaining tablets, but David was already there, having pushed through the small crowd that had formed around Janet. "Mom, are you hurt?" He knelt beside me, his face creased with worry. "You shouldn't be down on the floor at your age." "I'm perfectly fine, sweetheart." I let him help me up, palming the last visible pill as I rose. "Just trying to help clean up this mess." The full lights came back on with a mechanical hum, making everyone blink and squint. In the harsh fluorescent glare, Sarah looked older than her 34 years, her carefully applied makeup unable to hide the fear in her eyes. She'd managed to collect most of her spilled belongings, but I could see her doing quick mental calculations, trying to figure out how many pills were missing. "Janet, let's get you to the hospital," Principal Martinez was saying. "That ankle needs an X-ray." As 2 men helped Janet toward the exit, I excused myself to the restroom, my heart hammering against my ribs. Once inside the small, sterile space, I examined my handful of evidence under the buzzing overhead light. 6 small white tablets, unmarked, identical to the one I'd seen Sarah slip into my drink. I pulled out my phone, the smartphone David had insisted I get last year, claiming I needed to stay connected. At the time, I'd grumbled about learning new technology, but now I was grateful for every computer class I'd taught myself, every digital database I'd mastered during my final years at the library. The internet search was simple enough: small white unmarked pill identification. The results made my stomach clench with cold fury. Rohypnol. The date rape drug. Colorless, odorless, and in the right dose, deadly for someone my age with my heart condition. My hands shook as I dropped the pills into a small envelope I kept in my purse. Old habits from years of collecting overdue notice slips and library receipts. Evidence secured, I splashed cold water on my face and looked at myself in the mirror. Theodora Carroway, 72 years old, retired librarian, and now officially the target of an attempted murder. The face looking back at me was pale but determined, silver hair slightly mussed from crawling around on the floor, but my eyes held something I hadn't seen there in years. Purpose. When I returned to the party, the mood had shifted. Janet's accident had dampened the celebration, and people were beginning to make polite excuses to leave. Sarah was standing near the refreshment table, dumping the entire bowl of punch down the sink with quick, nervous movements. "Such a shame about the power outage," she said when she noticed me watching. "The punch got warm. No point serving it now." "How thoughtful of you to take care of that." I moved closer, watching her hands tremble slightly as she worked. "You seem upset, dear. Is everything all right?" "Just worried about Janet. And disappointed about your party being cut short." She forced a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I wanted everything to be perfect for you." There was that word again. Perfect. "Oh, but it has been perfect," I said softly. "More educational than I expected." Sarah's hands stilled on the punch bowl. "Educational." "I've learned so much tonight. About planning, about preparation, about the importance of paying attention to details." I picked up one of the unused paper cups, turning it slowly in my hands. "For instance, I learned that rohypnol dissolves completely in about 15 seconds in acidic liquids. Fascinating chemistry." The cup slipped from Sarah's hands, bouncing once on the floor before rolling under the table. Her face had gone white as paper. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you?" I kept my voice conversational, the same tone I'd used to help nervous students with their research. "I also learned that the recommended dosage for someone my size and age would be about 10 milligrams. Any more than that, and well." I shrugged delicately. "Let's just say the desired effect becomes much more permanent." Sarah's breathing had become shallow, rapid. She glanced around the room, probably looking for David, but he was outside helping load Janet into someone's car. "You're confused, Theodora. Maybe you should sit down." "Actually, I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years." I stepped closer, close enough to see the panic swimming in her eyes. "Tell me, Sarah, what was the plan after I collapsed? A tragic heart attack at my own retirement party? So sad, so unexpected, but at my age, these things happen." "You're being paranoid." "Am I? Then you won't mind if I have these pills tested." I patted my purse gently. "I'm sure the police lab could tell us exactly what they are." The word police hit Sarah like a physical blow. She actually swayed on her feet, grabbing the edge of the table for support. "You don't understand," she whispered. "You don't know how bad things are. David's business, the medical bills from his father's treatment last year, the mortgage on the house. We're drowning, Theodora. We're going to lose everything." There it was. The truth, finally. Not that I hadn't suspected. I'd seen the stress lines around my son's eyes, noticed how they'd stopped talking about vacation plans or new purchases. But murder? That was a solution I'd never imagined they'd consider. "So you decided to speed up your inheritance." "It wasn't supposed to hurt. The doctor said you wouldn't feel anything, that it would be like going to sleep." Tears were running down Sarah's cheeks now, cutting tracks through her makeup. "And then everything would be easier for everyone. You wouldn't have to worry about getting older, about being alone, about being inconvenient." Sarah's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. In the distance, I could hear David's voice as he came back inside, thanking someone for helping with Janet. "Here's what's going to happen," I said quietly. "You're going to go home tonight and think very carefully about the choices you've made. And tomorrow morning, you're going to do the right thing." "What do you mean?" "You'll figure it out." I patted her arm gently, the same comforting gesture I'd used with countless distressed library patrons over the years. "You're a smart girl, Sarah. I'm sure you'll make the right decision." David appeared beside us, slightly out of breath. "Mom, I'm sorry about all this chaos. Not exactly the retirement party we planned." "On the contrary," I said, smiling up at my son's concerned face. "It's been perfectly illuminating." As we gathered our things to leave, I noticed Sarah's hands shaking so badly she could barely hold her car keys. She looked like a woman who'd seen a ghost, or maybe a woman who'd just realized she'd failed to create one. The drive home with David was quiet, filled with his apologies about the power outage and Janet's accident. I let him talk, making appropriate responses while my mind raced ahead to tomorrow, to the conversation I'd need to have, to the choices that would need to be made. We pulled into my driveway, the same house I'd shared with my late husband for 43 years, the house Sarah had been counting on inheriting sooner rather than later. David walked me to the door, kissing my cheek and promising to call tomorrow. I watched his taillights disappear down the street, then turned to unlock my front door. The porch light cast everything in warm yellow tones, so different from the harsh emergency lighting at the community center. Safe. Familiar. Home. I was reaching for the door handle when I heard it, the soft crunch of footsteps on the gravel walkway behind me. I turned, expecting to see a neighbor or perhaps David coming back for something he'd forgotten. Instead, I found myself face to face with a stranger. A tall man in a dark coat, his features hidden in the shadows beyond my porch light's reach. "Mrs. Carroway?" His voice was soft, almost polite. "I believe you have something that belongs to my employer." Chapter 3. The Final Lesson. The stranger stepped closer, and the porch light revealed a face that could have belonged to an accountant or a banker. Unremarkable, forgettable, except for the coldness in his pale blue eyes. "I'm sorry, but I think you have me confused with someone else," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding my system. "It's quite late for a social call." "Mrs. Carroway, let's not play games. My employer is very interested in recovering certain items that went missing tonight. Small white items that fell from a purse." He smiled, but it never reached those dead eyes. "She's willing to pay handsomely for their return." So Sarah had called in reinforcements. Professional ones, by the look of him. I kept my expression neutral, falling back on decades of dealing with difficult patrons who thought they could intimidate an old librarian. I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about. Perhaps you should discuss this with your employer directly. Oh, but I think you do know. He took another step forward, close enough now that I could smell his cologne. Expensive, cloying. And I think you're going to invite me inside so we can have a proper conversation about those items. The smart thing would have been to scream, to run, to do any of the things they tell elderly women to do when confronted by danger. Instead, I found myself thinking about all the true crime books I'd catalogued over the years, all the mystery novels I'd recommended to patrons, all the research I'd helped police detectives with when they'd come to the library looking for information. Knowledge was power. And I'd spent my entire career accumulating both. Very well, I said, turning to unlock my front door. But I should warn you, I've already called the police. It was a lie, but a calculated one. His step faltered just slightly, and I caught the brief flicker of uncertainty that crossed his features before the professional mask slid back into place. I don't think you have, Mrs. Carroway. But it's a nice try. I opened the door and stepped inside, not bothering to hold it open for him. He followed anyway, and I heard the soft click as he closed it behind us. My living room looked exactly as I'd left it that morning. Crocheted afghans on the sofa, reading glasses on the side table, a half-finished crossword puzzle beside my favorite chair. The picture of elderly domesticity. Lovely home, he said, his eyes scanning the room with professional thoroughness. Very cozy. Now about those pills. Would you like some tea? I asked, moving toward the kitchen. I always find these conversations go better with refreshments. He laughed, a sound like breaking glass. You're quite something, Mrs. Carroway. Most people your age would be sobbing by now. Most people my age haven't spent 40 years dealing with every type of human behavior imaginable. I filled the kettle with water, noting the weight of it, the solid heft of cast iron. Sugar? Cream? Just the pills, thanks. I turned to face him, leaning against the kitchen counter with the same casual ease I'd used when helping confused freshmen find their research materials. Tell me something. How long have you been working for Sarah? Long enough to know she's not as smart as she thinks she is. He'd positioned himself in the kitchen doorway, blocking my escape route. Textbook intimidation tactics. Getting emotional about the job. Making it personal instead of professional. And you disapprove of mixing business with pleasure? I disapprove of sloppy work. Tonight was sloppy. His eyes never left mine. You weren't supposed to notice anything. You weren't supposed to collect evidence. You certainly weren't supposed to still be breathing. The kettle began to whistle behind me, a sharp, insistent sound that filled the suddenly quiet kitchen. I turned to remove it from the heat, using the moment to pallet the 6 white pills from my purse into my hand. You know, I said conversationally, dropping tea bags into 2 cups, I've been thinking about your employer's problem. Have you now? I poured the steaming water, watching the amber color bloom through the liquid. She's in quite a predicament. The original plan failed, there's evidence missing, and now she's had to involve outside help. Very expensive outside help, I imagine. You're stalling. Actually, I'm negotiating. I added sugar to both cups, stirring slowly. You see, I've been doing some research since I got home. Amazing what you can accomplish with a smartphone and 40 years of information literacy training. I could see his reflection in the kitchen window, still blocking the doorway, but his attention was focused on my movements. Good. For instance, did you know that Sarah Peterson, formerly Sarah Blackwood, was married once before? To an elderly gentleman named Harold Peterson, who died very suddenly of a heart attack just 6 months after their wedding. I lifted one of the teacups, inhaling the fragrant steam. Such a tragedy. Though I understand she inherited quite substantially from poor Harold. The stranger's stillness had a different quality now. Predatory focus shifting to genuine attention. And then there was her brief employment at Sunset Manor Nursing Home, before she met my son. Curious how many of their elderly residents passed away during her 6-month tenure. Natural causes, of course. Old age. Heart failure. The usual suspects. I took a sip of tea, savoring both the warmth and the growing tension in the room. Amazing how a little digging can reveal such interesting patterns. What's your point, Mrs. Carroway? My point is that your employer isn't just desperate, she's a serial killer. And you, my professional friend, have just made yourself accessory to a rather extensive list of murders. I smiled over the rim of my teacup. I wonder how your other clients would feel about that kind of exposure? For the first time since he'd appeared on my porch, the stranger looked genuinely unsettled. Professional criminals, I'd learned from my mystery novels, prefer to keep their various enterprises separate. Clean compartments. Minimal exposure. You're bluffing. Am I? I set down my cup and moved to my laptop, which sat open on the kitchen table. Would you like to see the email I sent to Detective Morrison at the county police an hour ago? Complete with photographs of the pills, copies of Harold Peterson's death certificate, employment records from Sunset Manor, and a rather detailed timeline of suspicious deaths. His face had gone pale. You said you hadn't called the police. I said I'd called them. I didn't say I'd called them tonight. I clicked on my email, turning the screen so he could see the sent message timestamp. 1 hour and 17 minutes ago, to be precise. Detective Morrison is an old friend. I helped him research a cold case last year. Lovely man. Very thorough. The sound of car doors slamming outside made us both freeze. Through my kitchen window, I could see the red and blue flash of police lights painting the neighbor's house in alternating colors. You clever old bitch, the stranger whispered. Language, I chided gently. And it's clever old librarian, thank you very much. The front door burst open with a crash of splintering wood. Police. Nobody move. The stranger's hand went inside his coat, but I was already moving. The cast iron kettle, still hot from the stove, caught him across the temple with a satisfying thunk. He dropped like a sack of returned books, his head bouncing once off my linoleum floor. In here. I called out cheerfully. Kitchen. Detective Morrison appeared in my doorway, gun drawn, taking in the scene with practiced eyes. The unconscious man on my floor, the kettle in my hands, and me standing there in my retirement party dress like some homicidal grandmother. Mrs. Carroway, are you hurt? Not a scratch, detective. Though I'm afraid this gentleman has a nasty bump on his head. He really should be more careful in unfamiliar kitchens. 3 hours later, I sat in my living room with a cup of properly brewed tea, watching through my window as they loaded Sarah into the back of a police car. She tried to run when they'd arrived at her house, but apparently she'd never been much of an athlete. Detective Morrison settled into my husband's old chair with his notepad, shaking his head in amazement. Mrs. Carroway, in 23 years of police work, I've never seen anything like this. You do realize you could have been killed tonight? Nonsense. I had everything well in hand. I sipped my tea, feeling more alive than I had in months. Besides, someone had to stop her. How many more elderly people would she have killed if I'd simply gone along with her plan? At least 6 that we know of, possibly more. We're reopening cases in 3 states now. He looked up from his notes. The man in your kitchen.